Recently, my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell on me quite unexpectedly. She cheerfully announced that we would be living together from now on. To accommodate this, we've transformed our house into 2 separate living spaces. Is the house in your name, Judy? I'm sorry to ask, but could you handle the $62,000 bill for the renovations? She inquired. Both my mother-in-law and husband found this situation amusing, but it sparked a firm resolve within me. I was prepared to share something significant with them, something my husband wasn't yet aware of. I even had proof. My name is Judy, and I am 27 years old. I reside a bit outside the city in a serene area surrounded by nature. I work in an office and enjoy drawing as a hobby. Recently, I've started sharing my artwork online and enjoy reading the feedback from people. My husband, who is 2 years my senior, and I have been blissfully married and living in our cherished old farmhouse ever since our wedding. However, we have had a recurring visitor since then who consistently manages to stress me out. "Judy, I'm here. Please open up quickly." I heard the urgent pounding at the door. Ah, it's my mother-in-law, I thought to myself as I rushed to greet her. Although there's a doorbell right beside the door, she never uses it. I tried to maintain a pleasant demeanor as I slid the door open. There are so many bugs around here, it's so annoying. Is Eric still at work? Poor thing, even on a Saturday. Oh, I brought some of his favorite food, she babbled on. As I saw the weary-looking woman holding a large bag at the door, I forced a smile, trying to keep up with her chatter. This once-a-month visitor, none other than my husband's mother, always had a way of making her presence felt. Since my husband is an only child, his mother feels a strong sense of responsibility to look after him, a duty she has embraced even after our marriage. She often gives me advice on how to manage our household. During her last visit, she took it upon herself to reorganize our entire refrigerator, which made preparing breakfast the next morning quite challenging for me. Before we got married, my husband had mentioned that if his parents ever needed care, we would have to live with them. He hoped I would understand. While the idea of leaving our quaint old farmhouse someday saddened me, I had come to terms with it. However, the prospect of living permanently with my mother-in-law filled me with dread, and I couldn't help but feel sorry for my husband, knowing he wasn't particularly enthusiastic about it either. 3 years into our marriage, while we were settled in the farmhouse, my husband received distressing news. His father had slipped on the stairs at home and broken his leg. "They'll need our help from now on," he said. "Let's live together, just like we talked about before we got married. It's important." Though I was concerned for my father-in-law's well-being, my mind raced with personal worries. Can I still find time for my drawing? I wondered aloud. Drawing was not just a hobby for me, it was a crucial outlet for my creativity and stress relief. My husband, perhaps unaware of the depth of my concerns, simply responded, "I need you to focus on the house," before heading off to work. Left alone in my room, surrounded by my sketches and drawings, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. As I sifted through my artwork, I tried to sort through my mixed emotions about this new chapter of our lives. Just when I had resolved to make the best of the situation and move in with his parents, an unexpected twist arose, changing everything once again. While I was at work one day, I suddenly experienced a numbing sensation in my hands and feet, accompanied by severe dizziness. Before I knew it, I had collapsed on the floor. Thankfully, a colleague noticed and quickly called an ambulance. Although I was scared, the doctors soon informed me that I wasn't in immediate danger, but the episode was actually a stroke, which was shocking given my young age. Following a thorough medical examination, I was reminded of the numerous times health checkups had highlighted my high blood pressure, a warning I had foolishly ignored. Now, facing the consequences, I regretted not taking those warnings more seriously. The journey from discovering my condition to undergoing tests, having surgery, and finally entering recovery spanned about a month. It all unfolded so rapidly that it left me reeling. During this tumultuous time, I was disheartened by my husband's lack of concern. When I called him, hands trembling from the shock and fear, his response chilled me. Instead of comfort or worry, there was a tone of disappointment in his voice as he remarked, "So, living together has to wait, huh?" I was stunned that he seemed more concerned about our plans to move in with his parents than about my critical health condition. Fortunately, my father-in-law was still in the hospital recovering from his fracture, which meant I didn't need to manage his care. This was a small blessing, as it allowed me to focus entirely on my recovery. Another relief was that we didn't have children, which meant no additional stressors during this period. Thoughts of my mother-in-law's eagerness for grandchildren surfaced, but I pushed them aside and reached for my sketchbook instead. Lately, the chaos of preparing to live with my in-laws and dealing with my health had kept me from my favorite pastime, drawing. Realizing that moving in with them would only further limit my time for this hobby, I decided to view my stay in the hospital as an unexpected gift of freedom. I resolved to use this time to indulge in drawing as much as possible, embracing my passion fully before the demands of family life could once again take over. I had made a vow to myself to do my best for my husband and in-laws, dedicating myself fully to the household chores and anything else that needed attention. The month I spent in the hospital for my recovery seemed to pass in the blink of an eye, and soon it was time for me to go home. My husband casually offered to pick me up from the hospital, but I craved a moment of solitude and decided to take the bus instead, feeling slightly guilty for declining his gesture. As the bus trundled along, I gazed out the window, taking in the familiar scenery unfolding before me. The sunlight danced on the lush green leaves, casting a glow that was nothing short of breathtaking. Yet a wave of sadness washed over me. I was saying goodbye to this beautiful, natural setting as we were moving to my in-laws' place, which was much closer to the hustle and bustle of the city. My life was about to change dramatically. Upon reaching my usual bus stop, I disembarked and started walking towards what I thought would be my beloved old home. However, as I approached, I stopped dead in my tracks, struck by complete astonishment. In place of the familiar, cozy house I had left behind was a structure I didn't recognize. An entirely new house stood before me. Confusion set in as I had been away only for a couple of months. I double-checked the surrounding buildings and the path I had taken, wondering if I was mistaken or if I had gotten off at the wrong location. But everything else was exactly as I remembered, except for the house itself. With nowhere else to go, I hesitantly pressed the intercom of this unrecognizable house. A voice that I knew very well, undoubtedly my husband's, answered with a simple yes. Still reeling from confusion, I whispered into the intercom, "It's Judy." The front door slowly creaked open, and there stood my husband, dressed casually as if nothing was amiss. "Ah, welcome home. You're back earlier than I expected," he said with a casual smile, leaving me to piece together the changes that had occurred during my absence. Today was my day off, so I had the whole day to myself. "I could have picked you up," Eric said casually as I stared at our house, barely recognizing it. "Eric, what happened to our house? Why has it changed so much?" I asked, cutting him off mid-sentence. His demeanor was too relaxed, almost as if he had just woken up with his hair all messy, and he seemed to ignore my growing anxiety. "Huh? What's going on? What happened?" he muttered, not directly addressing my questions. Just then, laughter echoed from inside the house. Unable to contain my disbelief, I pushed past my husband and headed straight to the living room. As I opened the unfamiliar door, I was met with the sight of my mother-in-law sprawled on the couch, laughing heartily while watching TV. "Why is my mother-in-law here in this house?" I demanded, utterly bewildered. "Judy, welcome back. Hospital stays can be so long, but don't worry, I took care of the house while you were gone." My mother-in-law responded casually, as if nothing was amiss. Her words confused me even more. Took care of the house? Did she just mean doing chores? With a sinking feeling, I pressed her further. Why has our old house changed so much? Without any hint of regret, she explained nonchalantly, "Well, since we're all going to live together, I thought it would be more comfortable to remodel it into a duplex." The phrase, remodeled it into a duplex, echoed over and over in my mind. My mother-in-law had always been one to meddle in our lives, but renovating our house without our consent was beyond what I could have imagined. Weren't we supposed to move into my in-laws' house closer to the city center? Every time she visited our old house, she complained about the bugs and the long walk from the station. So why all these sudden changes now? I stood there, trying to piece together the alterations, not just to our home, but to our lives as well. While switching off the TV with a grin, my mother-in-law suddenly announced, "And there's something else important I have to tell you." The casual flick of the remote was paired with a mischievous smile as she continued, "The remodeling wasn't cheap, you know. And since the title to this house is under your name, Judy, I'm afraid you'll have to handle the payment." Her chuckle filled the room, devoid of any remorse. "Ah, it's $62,000, she gleefully added, her smile broadening as she delivered the news as casually as one would discuss the weather. The figure of $62,000 slammed into me like a physical blow, making my legs tremble and my mind reel. I was speechless, staring at her as she laughed carelessly. At that moment, my husband walked into the living room. Seeing him, I moved towards him, clinging to a sliver of hope that he might support me. I relayed what his mother had just declared, my voice desperate for his understanding, maybe even his defense, but all he offered was a dismissive nod. "Well, that sounds about right. You'll handle it, won't you?" That response stung deeply. It was a pattern. When I had my stroke, he was more concerned about our living arrangements than my well-being. He was a man deeply influenced by his mother, hanging on her every word, no matter how absurd. At that moment, my frustration and unhappiness with my husband reached a breaking point. With resolve surging through me, I made a decisive choice. "I understand now, Eric. I'm going to divorce you and your mother, Marilyn. And no, Marilyn, you can handle the renovation costs on your own," I declared resolutely. With those words, I turned my back on them, intending to exit the room swiftly and close this painful chapter of my life. However, they were not about to let me walk away so easily. "I've been losing interest in you anyway, so it's no big deal," Eric said nonchalantly. "But remember, this house is in your name, Judy. You have a financial responsibility here," he added with a sharp tone. "That's right. Feel free to leave, but please settle your dues first," Marilyn chimed in, her words dripping with entitlement. I was stunned by their sheer selfishness and audacity. A deep sigh escaped me, and although I was tempted to turn around and confront their likely smug expressions, I chose not to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I stood firm and faced them with a composed reply. "You keep saying the house is in my name, Eric, but did you forget that the ownership was transferred to you?" I countered, revealing a truth they hadn't expected. They laughed, assuming I was bluffing just to avoid payment. That's when I reminded them of a significant detail they had conveniently forgotten. "Remember when we got married? You asked me to change the property's ownership because you didn't want the house to be in your wife's name. It wouldn't look good for appearances," I explained. Since I didn't care much about the property title back then, I transferred it to his name without hesitation. Their laughter ceased abruptly, replaced by a creeping sense of panic. "I don't recall saying such a thing. There's no proof anyway," Eric quickly retorted. Anticipating this denial, I turned on my heel, walked past them, and pulled open a drawer and a shelf from what used to be our shared space in the old house. "Let's see, it should be right here," "Ah, here it is," I announced as I found the document. Pulling out the paperwork that listed the property and house ownership, I presented it to them. When I pointed to the section showing that the ownership was indeed in Eric's name, his face turned ashen. "That's a fraud. I never thought you'd actually do it," he stammered, his facade crumbling. The tables had turned, and the reality of his machinations was now starkly apparent in his stunned expression. "I definitely can't pay such a huge sum of $62,000, Eric exclaimed in disbelief. I was appalled by my husband's reaction. His voice escalated into yelling the moment he realized the financial obligation was his to bear. Given that a reasonable conversation was now out of the question, I declared, "Let's handle this through lawyers from now on. Marilyn, your son seems to be in quite a predicament, so I trust you'll take good care of him." I maintained my composure beside my increasingly loud husband and afforded a calm smile to my mother-in-law, who stood dazed by the unfolding events. Then, turning my back on them, I left their home for good. Afterward, my husband attempted to reach out several times, but I ignored his calls, opting to manage our communications formally through legal representation. Our strained relationship and ongoing issues with my mother-in-law meant that the divorce proceeded smoothly. As for my husband's accusations that changing the property's ownership was fraudulent, the legal proceedings confirmed it was a mutual decision made at the time of our marriage 3 years earlier. My lawyer, smiling reassuringly, confirmed that this was neither fraudulent nor illegal. With that, any lingering doubts I had evaporated. It turned out that I was expected to foot the bill for the house renovations immediately upon my discharge from the hospital, a move that seemed particularly spiteful, considering I had just undergone surgery and rehabilitation. However, the irony of the situation became clear when it was confirmed that since the house was legally in my husband's name, he was ultimately responsible for the hefty renovation costs. In trying to trap me, he had inadvertently trapped himself. After the divorce was finalized, I managed to secure alimony, while my husband grappled with a financial claim that was beyond his means to settle. He either had to borrow money from dubious sources or default on the payment entirely. Amidst the ongoing legal disputes with my husband and mother-in-law, I received an unexpected apology from my father-in-law, Henry, who had been hospitalized with a broken leg. He expressed his regret over the actions of his wife and son. Although Henry had not been directly involved, he acknowledged his passive role over the 3 years since our marriage, having overlooked the issues caused by his wife and son's indifferent attitudes. After acknowledging Henry's message, I decided it was time to sever all ties with my old family and start anew. Since then, my health has improved significantly, and I was able to resume work. During my marriage, drawing was a hobby that felt constrained by my husband's presence. Now, liberated from those restrictions, I can delve into my art whenever and however I desire. Initially just a pastime, drawing has evolved into a professional endeavor as I started receiving job offers through the social networking site where I post my illustrations. Nowadays, I spend more time drawing for work than for leisure. My current dream is to buy an old farmhouse in a quaint rural town, using the alimony from my divorce and my savings, with plans to open an art studio there. Today, I'm taking a significant step towards achieving this dream as I head out to view an old farmhouse. As I gaze out the window on my way there, I'm filled with a sense of hopeful anticipation about the future and the creative freedom awaiting me in my new life. As I look out the window of the bus, my mind drifts back to the day I left the hospital, a day that irrevocably changed the course of my life. The natural scenery outside has remained unchanged, the same as it was on that transformative day, yet my perspective is so much clearer now. I'm brimming with excitement for the new chapter ahead. The sunlight filters through the trees, casting a radiant glow on the leaves, making them appear incredibly vibrant and dazzling. This view, so full of life and color, mirrors the hopeful anticipation I feel for what's to come.